I'm Ken Simmons. I had to do that. Come on, hello. There was a guy many years ago whose name was Herb Schreiner. He was a comedian, a stand-up comedian. And somebody from the television network saw him, said, you should be on TV. So he came out, hello, and he'd tell jokes, but he'd tell intellectual kind of jokes. I don't know why I brought that up, because when I was back in makeup, when they were doing my hair, I just happened to think of this. I'm so doggone old that I can remember we didn't have a telephone. How about that? We got a telephone when I was about 10 or 12 years old, and here's how that went. Here's how that went. You pick up the phone, and somebody in the other room would say, hi, Kenny, how are you? How's your mom? I'd say, fine, Rosemary, how are you? I'm good. What can I do for you? I said, could you ring Carl Moeller? Oh, yeah, I could ring him for you, but I just saw him downtown. He won't be home for an hour. I said, okay, thanks. Boom. And that's the way it went, believe it or not. That's the way it went. Also, this happened. You pick up the phone. Somebody say, who's that? Who picked up the phone? I say, I did. I'm on the phone, can't you tell? I said, no, I couldn't tell. I'm sorry. You hang up. It was a 3-party line. There were 2 other parties on with us. Otherwise, you couldn't afford to pay for the phone. That's the way it went. And it was, I can remember before radio, the street I lived on in Randolph, the street I lived on had about, I don't know, 100 houses. And 50% of them had outdoor toilets. I remember all that. You know why? Because I'm so old. Somebody out there said, how old are you? I'm so old that I remember Methuselah. How about that? Hey, I got to tell you something. Before we meet our guests for today, who you're going to, don't go away, because they've got a very important message. But I got to tell you something. This show, it's only the 3rd episode, and it's going good. Because I was over to Shaw's the other day, and a little old lady, she must have been 4'8", and she had white, silvery hair. She was cute as a button, cute as a button. And she grabbed my sleeve, and she looks up at me. Not many people look up at me. She grabbed, and she said, are you the guy on television? And I said, yes, modestly. I try to be modest. I'm not modest. I said, yes, I'm the guy on television. She said, I saw your show. Oh, I said, well, it's very nice of you to mention that. Yeah. Ken Simmons, right? I said, yes. Were you always Ken Simmons? I said, yes, ma'am. She's about 80 years old. I said, yes, ma'am. I've always been Ken Simmons as far as I know. Yeah, I saw your show. She started to walk away. And I said, oh, by the way, how'd you like it? Oh, yeah, it sucked. So you can tell, people are watching the show anyway. All right, we're going to go over and meet my 2 guests. They're lovely people. You're going to enjoy them, and you're going to pay attention to the message. So take off your shoes, pour yourself your favorite beverage, and I'll be talking to you. Okay, we're back. I promised you we'll be back. Here I am in all my glory. You know, before I introduce you to my 2 guests today, the last show I did, we did a show on a 15-minute segment on people who lose a spouse. My wife passed away 10 years ago, you know that, and how I coped with it, and I'm trying to cope with it even now. It's very difficult. But I don't want to get into that. But I neglected to say one thing, that if you still have your spouse, your husband, you have your wife, if you still have your husband, every day, to let them know somehow how much you love them. 3 words, I love you, doesn't hurt. Or maybe bring a rose home in the case of a wife. Maybe bring a couple of 6-packs of beer home, whatever. Just let them know, while they're still here, how much you appreciate them. All right. I have with me today 2 lovely, wonderful people, and I'm going to be honest with you, because as you know, I like spontaneity. I don't like to meet my guests before I talk to them. But in this case, I happen to know these people. I happen to know these people, and they are lovely people. They're not intimate friends of mine. We don't socialize. But when Dave comes in for a cup of coffee, I'm awfully glad to see him. His wife, I don't see that often. I won't go any further than that. They're very, very nice people. They have a very interesting and important message to convey to you. So please meet Debbie and Dave Glass. Hi, guys.
Hello,
Hi.
good morning.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. The topic that you're going to talk about is a rather serious topic, and they're going to be very honest and open. So without further ado, Dave, I'll let you lead off. What's the topic all about? What are we going to talk about today?
Well, the topic is how to survive, how to recover, how to live with substance abuse within your family. We've done all three. Our story, unlike so many sad stories, has a happy ending, which is why we're here today. Our story began over 20 years ago. Our son started using marijuana at the early age of 14. By the time he was 16, he had dropped out of high school. Deb and I were married then, right around that same time, and he spiraled into the typical routine of an addict, using marijuana, graduating to cocaine. He was living with us for a while. We had him living with us while he was using. It was a difficult experience for us. We were newlyweds. We were trying to discover each other. Substance abuse was the furthest from our mind. We were panicking because of his using.
Can I interrupt you for a second, Dave? You said you were newlyweds. Can you clarify that? Because you said your boy was 15?
Sure. We met in 1988. We had both been divorced for a number of years.
I see. Okay.
When I met Deb, she told me her son was using and had dropped out of high school.
Okay, I get it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. We sought help, which is going to be the focus of the short time that we have this morning, advising you and suggesting to you that you seek help if you're having problems within your family with substance abuse. We tried tough love. We attended meetings. We tried learn to cope. We attended their meetings. However, we still had our son who was using to deal with. Our son would go out of the house at 11 o'clock at night, go to the nearest Cumberland's and use. We later found out that he was also dealing, and it was at that time that our tough love really had to come into play. However, just a background of our son in his usage. He went from heroin to crack cocaine to other drugs, and he was out of control. He eventually was asked to leave our house because of the dealing at our home. That led to him being on the streets, like so many addicts are today, living wherever he could find a place to live. I will give him credit. He was seeking ways to recover. He attended every recovery house that we can think of in the state of Massachusetts, and we supported him during that time. However, his addiction got control of him. He was into crack cocaine, as I mentioned, and he had tried to find a job. He did find a job. He couldn't keep it because of his addiction. And the key to that was, here is my wife, her son, trying to deal with this horrendous problem. She was keeping it to herself. She was keeping it within herself. And eventually, she could not take it any longer, and she sought help. And I'm going to let her tell you how that happened.
Well, I think the one thing I want to say right off the bat is that there isn't any shame in addiction. I think everybody's addicted to something. whether it's eating, shopping, drinking, there's work. People are addicted to work. So there's an addiction, there's something that we all like to do. I think the hardest part about drugs is they're illegal and they lead to so much crime and other things. But you just asked me how I learned to deal with it. Initially, back, my son is 44, and he started using drugs when he was 14, and he used for until he was 36. And back then, you didn't hear as much about addiction. Today it's in the forefront. It's a major topic because it's out of control. But back then, you just wanted to remain anonymous. You didn't want anyone to know what was going on in your family because it was shameful, and a heroin addict was what you saw in Boston, living on the street with a needle sticking out of their arm. People didn't think of them back then as fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, children, and that's what it's come to today. I reached the point with my son that I tried everything. I tried helping him, giving him money. I tried to think and do anything I could say or any action on my part that I thought would help him, and nothing helped. I reached the point where every night I went to bed crying, and every morning I woke up with tears in my eyes. I would lay with my head on the pillow with the tears dripping down my cheeks into my earlobes, wondering when it was ever going to end. I actually reached the point where I thought that he was probably going to die, he was probably going to overdose, and if that was going to happen, then well, maybe the sooner the better, because the sooner it happened, I would be able to get back to some kind of a normal life. And I knew I was always had been a person of faith and went to church, and I believed that God would somehow get me through it. There were many times when I just tried to take my hands off my son and just say, God, he's yours, whatever happens, happens. There were nights where I even prayed that God would take me. I would rather die than have to go through what I was going through. It was that painful. The one good thing out of all of it, because there is good in everything, is that because of my son's addiction, I really became closer to God. For me, he became my source of strength. And I did reach a time at which I walked into my church all alone one day, and I sat there for 3 or 4 hours, and I just cried and I prayed. And I said, God, he's yours. Whatever happens, I know you'll get me through it. And that was my turning point, because after that, I had the strength, to cope with all the rest. And I started talking to people. I even went down to the courthouse and had my son sectioned for 30 days. He had been in trouble, but he never really ended up doing jail time at all for anything. He never got in trouble that way, other than, he would be picked up by the police for possession and, be in jail overnight. But he never really went to jail where, so many young people today do. And the last thing as a parent that I ever wanted for him was to have a record, because, that just would ruin your life. So as a parent, you're trying to do everything to keep your kid from not having a record. So you find yourself trying to help them all the time, and really, there's a point where helping becomes enabling. And it's really, I found out for me it was better if I just took my hands off and let him take that big fall.
Can I stop you just for a minute there?
Mhm.
I think it's time to take a breath. I don't know how you people out there feel. This is a very moving experience for me. I have 2 boys. Thank God they're over that stage. But what these 2 people just told you from the bottom of their hearts, to reveal that, I think is incredible. So let them take a little breath, and we'll be right back. Okay, we're back. when I left, I said that it's a pretty moving story. You people that have children, grandchildren, or nieces, or nephews, there's so much of this going on, not just here in Carver or Plimpton or Halifax, but all over the country. It's a very serious problem. I'm not going to even give you the numbers of how many young people die from overdoses, because I don't want to get that morbid, but I'm sure you know. Young people dying senselessly, uselessly from this thing we call drugs. When I was a kid, if you stole a beer, it was a big deal, but that was about the extent of it. I'm not going to talk a lot because I find the glasses, what they have to say is most interesting, and so I'm going to turn it back over to them. Debbie, you want to continue with where you were?
Well, I trying to think where I was.
Not easy.
I calmed down a little bit because I was
You're
getting
doing a
kind of
great
emotional.
job.
I think one thing that I really would like to say to people is that I think it's a lot easier to keep your kids from using drugs than it is to clean up the mess afterwards. They say that addiction is a disease. I've seen a lot of people that recover and don't use for a while, and then something triggers it, and they go back to it. So it becomes something that, when you want that safety net or you want pleasure, women will feel down for the day, they'll go out shopping, or we eat a bag of cookies, or everybody has something that makes, we all have I think, an emptiness inside of us, a little space that I think God left there so that we would seek something. And actually, I think we're supposed to seek Him. But instead, we fill it with other things. And that emptiness is always going to be there. And people are going to go back to that, I think, in a time of crisis or trauma, unless they've learned to really cope with that. So even addicts that have stopped using, I hope my son will never use again. He's been clean for 8 years, thank God. And I pray that he never will use again. But that all depends on him. And it takes willpower, and it takes, I think, submitting yourself to other good learned behaviors and ways to cope.
Let me ask you a question here. I've got so many questions I want to ask, and we've got a limited time, as you know.
Yeah.
But you said your son's been clean for 8 years?
Yeah.
Does he, you talk to him, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
You're still friends after all this.
Yeah.
Does he express a desire to try it again?
No, my son went to, the way that he got clean is he went to all kinds of different rehabs. As I said, I even sectioned him for 30 days. I always thought if he could be sober for a weekend, or sober for a week, or sober for a month, that would be the end of it. And the thing is, you don't learn to cope with what's inside of you that's making you use and, cope with problems, with drugs. So he ended up going to Teen Challenge, which is a faith-based drug rehab program that at the time that he went into it was a 21-month program. Now it's a 15-month program.
That's incredible. Where is it? Is there a cost to that?
Well, it's a faith-based program, so they don't get any, aid from the state or the government. And they're all supported by, people whose family members are there. They ask you to pledge a certain amount of money, whatever you can do. And then they have fundraising banquets and golf tournaments, and churches support them. And my son works for them now. Matter of fact,
He works for them?
Yeah, matter of fact, he's he's in program development. He puts on banquets and raises money. And so would he ever use again? I would hope not. I mean, because now he's he's still associated to the program. He went on a missions trip 4 years ago and met a gal from El Salvador, and they got married a year ago. He just went through the immigration process and got her here.
Oh, that's great. Do you have any children? Are you a grandparent?
Not yet, no, not yet. Well, we do have 7 grandchildren
Okay, yeah.
on his
But-
side, but
Dave, can I have your son's name, his first name?
Fred.
Would you consider what you've been through, and I think I consider you expert on the drug situation, would you consider marijuana a gateway drug?
I certainly do. I
You do?
consider marijuana a gateway drug as well as alcohol. As a
Alcohol also?
As a gateway drug, sure. If you mix alcohol with marijuana, that's a dangerous solution, and it leads to terrible, terrible results. Yes, the answer is yes, I do consider that. Yeah.
Does he at this stage, can he have suppose he's had an operation and he has to have a painkiller? Can he have a painkiller? A narcotic?
I'll let Mom answer that one.
yeah,
That's a good question, Ken.
yeah, I'm not sure.
Our immediate answer would be no. Not only could he not take a prescription drug right now, but he shouldn't be drinking alcohol or any of that. Anything that would tempt him to relapse.
How does he combat pain though? I mean, we all have occasions when we need some kind of a painkiller.
When he went into Teen Challenge, the program there, they really try to reprogram you.
Yeah.
You can't smoke, drink, use any kind of drugs. As a matter of fact, addicts that go in there can't really be on a lot of drugs maybe that they're taking on the outside, even, pain.
Yeah.
If someone's a diabetic and goes in there, I mean, they can be on insulin, that kind of thing.
Can he take a Tylenol?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a Tylenol,
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
A Vicodin, no.
Vicodin, no.
If he were to
Percocet,
have,
no.
if he were to have a need, if he had an operation, he would
Yeah.
probably have to tell the doctor, listen, I'm a recovered addict, and they would, take it from there. I'm not really sure. I don't have the answer to that,
Okay.
so.
I didn't mean to throw you a curve, but I was just
Yeah.
wondering, my wife passed away from cancer, and she was allergic to narcotics. It made her deathly ill. I mean, she was violently sick. So they finally had to put her into a coma, and that's the way she spent the rest of her days, in a coma. So, because she had a lot of pain. But what do you think about prescription drug now? There's a lot of talk about opioids. Am I saying that right?
Mhm.
What is an opioid? Is that a OxyContin? Is that an opioid?
Mhm.
Sure,
Yes.
Percocet.
Percocet.
Percocet?
Yeah.
And so a doctor prescribes this, and you could become addicted to that?
Yes. Mhm. If you take enough of it, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's kind of a funny statement, because if you take enough of anything, you're addicted to it, right?
Like Debbie said.
I have friends of mine that can't understand addiction.
Mhm.
My father was an alcoholic, my wife was an alcoholic, my brother was an alcoholic. And they can't understand why all they gotta do to stop that addiction is don't drink a beer, don't drink another drink. They can't understand why they can't do that. Can you give us a little insight into what happens to an addict?
Go ahead, Deb.
Well, I think an addict, even if they would like to stop, they can't stop because stopping makes them sick.
But you said now, even if they'd like to stop, don't all addicts want to stop?
Initially, maybe not. I think it's kind of recreational and,
It's fun until they realize they're hooked.
yeah, and then the high, I mean, I've heard addicts tell me, because we've been involved through Teen Challenge, we've been involved meeting a lot of addicts that have recovered, and they'll say there's no high as good as the first one. And then you're always chasing.
Try to replicate that.
Yeah, you're always chasing that initial high,
Yeah.
and you never get it again.
Yes.
And when they do, I think they really can't stop until they really want to stop, and then they have to detox, which in a lot of cases can be I mean, they're really sick when they go to detox.
Yeah,
And people don't understand. I never could understand why my son couldn't just stop. I mean, he knew what pain he was causing us. Why can't you just stop
Yeah.
and get a life?
yeah.
But
Have we answered that question? Why can't they stop?
Well, it's a brain thing, and Debbie has
Yeah.
a great...
Is it a brain thing?
Yeah.
Or a physical thing?
It's,
If they stop, they
it's
get
both.
sick.
It's both, but it's a brain thing. And Debbie has a great way of explaining what happens to the brain when they no longer can control themselves. The reason they can't control themselves is the brain is in control.
But isn't the brain in control of our lives anyway? I mean, we use our brains. I don't, but a lot of people use their brains every day.
If they're under the influence of substance abuse,
Okay.
it's a big difference.
All right. Before we go, you mentioned God. Do you think that God is a necessary part of an addict's stopping?
well, there are addicts that stop, and God's not involved in it. And there's lots of addicts.
I gotta stop you there. I'm not a highly religious person. However, I think God is involved in everything we do.
Oh yeah.
I think He's in control, and
There isn't anything that happens on this earth that has not filtered down through the will of God.
all right, that,
I totally believe that. But
Okay.
in answering your question, my son went to a faith-based program, and the routine and the regimen of it, and having God in it, and learning that God had a purpose for his life,
okay.
and that I think he learned self-esteem. He knew how much God loved him, and he knew that God had a purpose. And if you really are grateful to God, I think you want to do the best that you can with your life out of love for him and for yourself, because you'll learn to love yourself.
Okay, well, that's the basis for a whole other show.
Yeah, that's true.
But your son has been clean now for 8 years.
Yes.
Hopefully, he'll never go back to it. Have you got any advice for any of the parents that are watching out there, or any of the addicts, that might make it a little easier to cope with, or give it up, or whatever? Dave?
The advice that we have for parents who are victims of substance abuse within their families is to seek help. Help is out there. Do not keep it within yourself. Go out there and find the resources that are available to help you. And they are plentiful now. They weren't as plentiful back when we were first involved in it ourselves. But today, there are just a myriad of resources right here in the town of Carver and in Plymouth County. The law enforcement, Chief Dufley and the other law enforcement people are doing everything that they possibly can to provide resources for you. Go to your Carver internet and look up certain things. Look up Carver Cares. Look up the collaborative in Plymouth.
Good advice, Dave. Good advice. Good advice. Everybody, please take heed. I've got to stop it right now because we're up against the time thing. That's what television's all about. I love the fact that you both came here. I love the fact that you both opened your hearts and minds to the whole world. And I hope that somebody gets something out of it. If one person gets something out of this, we're having a successful show. Okay, thanks again. Until the next time, I'm Ken Simmons for Area 58 Community Access Media. And I'm going to be back, so that's not a threat. It's a promise. I'm going to be back. Until then, like Red Skelton used to say, my favorite comedian of all time, goodbye and God bless.